The best way to begin is to explain what capital punishment really is. As defined by Google, capital punishment is the legal authorized killing of someone as punishment for a crime. We both agree that for severe enough crimes that the offenders be put down, versus them having the option to get out and carry out more crimes. Imagine that a pedophile walks through Jordan, Minnesota, and rapes a human and kills it. Do you, as a student and or teacher of Jordan High School, want this said person living next to you or near your community?
But wait, there's more. Act now, and you could have all the sexual predators in your neighborhood eliminated for your taxes. Otherwise, you pay more taxes to keep them alive. As of right now, it costs more to have prisoners on death row, but that is because they aren't being executed. If they were to be executed or exonerated, then they would save money for the taxpayers. Releasing a death row inmate to being a regular inmate, that saves money. Executing death row inmates faster will also save money by having to pay less taxes on keeping them in a high security prison and the court costs. For all death row inmates to be euthanized now, it'll be cheaper in the end because we don't have to pay taxes to keep them in jail and they won't be in jail as long. But all things aside, there are many arguments for and against capital punishment. As seen before, we both are for capital punishment. Some people claim morality is a good reason not to give the death penalty, but stated by procon.org, we reserve the death penalty in the United States for the most heinous murders and the most brutal and conscienceless murderers. This is not, as some critics argue, a kind of state-run lottery that randomly chooses an unlucky few for the ultimate penalty, that among all those convicted of murder, rather, the punishment system is a filter that selects the worst of the worst.
Other terms, to sentence killers like those described above to less than death would be failed to do justice because the penalty, presumably a long period in prison, would be grossly disproportionate to the heinousness of the crime. Prosecutors, jurors, and the loved ones of murder victims understand this essential point. Perhaps most importantly, in its supreme gravity, it promotes belief in and respect for the majesty of the moral order and for the system of human law that both derives from the supports and moral order. Some people even claim there are mistakes made by the system, which there is, but procon.org states those in support of abolishing the death penalty point to the possibility of an innocent person being executed.
The innocent can take solace in knowing that a unanimous jury of 12 citizens must render the death verdict after an exhaustive trial where the accused murderer is represented by two highly competent attorneys and overseen by an independent judge who ensures a fair trial. Voters understand that the criminals on death row have been convicted of the most heinous crimes. Voters also realize that those left behind, grieving families throughout the United States and their loved ones, don't deserve anything less than justice. Newsweek shows that of the 1,395 people executed since 1977, a total of 138 people have been exonerated or found innocent. That makes a total of a 9.8% error. That's within government standards, with about 3,261 people on death row today, as found on statisticbrain.com.
Procon.org states foreclosure for victims' families that whatever your feelings are towards the death penalty, one thing most people will never know is the pain experienced when a family member, or in my case, a family members are brutally tortured and murdered.
In 1984, my mother's sister and two nephews were cold-heartedly shot to death by an 18-year-old gang member named Taquan Cox. Taquan was sentenced to death by a jury of his peers and has been on death row for 30 years after exhausting all of his appeals at both the state and federal level.
Cots, while on death row, attempted a violent takeover of the Supermax Adjustment Center at San Quentin with a goal to kill as many guards as possible. If he were executed, he wouldn't have been much trouble for the guard.
Procon.org also states for physicians at executions that we expect physicians to offer comfort care to the dying, even if the treatment, like morphine, to dampen end stage cancer pain, will inevitably hasten death. These physicians are not killing their patients, they are comforting them in their final moments of life. Death row inmates have certain parallels to dying patients. Death is coming, as in both, and the physician can do nothing to change that. All that they have to be offered is professional care during the final moments of life, and that should be of comfort to the condemned. The idea that physicians may participate in executions does not mean that they must do so.
But it should be an option for those who believe that they have a duty to ease suffering, and this duty includes caring for those who will die at the hands of the state. Physician involved in lethal injection can make capital punishment less gory, more palatable, and even routine. But so long as the state uses the tools of the physician to kill its citizens, those who wish to step into ensure that executions are, at the very least, adequately handled should have the option to do so.
Anything else is death penalty politics at the expense of the condemned. And no matter where you come out on capital punishment, no one should be sentenced to a botched execution.
Again, procon.org gives examples from deterrence for crimes. Some crimes are so heinous and inherently wrong that they have demand strict penalties, up to and including life sentences or even death.
Most Americans recognize this principle as just. Studies of the death penalty have reached various conclusions about its effectiveness in deterring crime, but the majority of studies that track effects over many years and across states or countries find a deterrent effect. Indeed, other recent investigations using a variety of samples and statistical methods consistently demonstrate a strong link between executions and reduced murder rates. In short, capital punishment does, in fact, save lives.
Procon.org states racism basically isn't a factor in death penalty sentences. Death penalty opponents state it is inherently unfair and racially biased. The facts, I believe, are otherwise.
The racial breakdown for those sentenced to death since 1977 is as follows: 48.6% white, 40.9% black, 8.9% Hispanic, 1.6% other. The race of defendants executed in the U.S. since 1976 is 56% white, 35% black, 7% Hispanic, 2% other, and the reasons for this discrepancy in the execution rate between blacks and whites is that juries deciding whether to impose the death penalty have concluded in more cases involving black defendants that there were condoning circumstances militating in favor of a lesser penalty.
The American public still supports the death penalty, notwithstanding the hammering capital punishment receives each year. I'm glad the American public does. In short, the death penalty or capital punishment is a good thing. Why, you might ask? Because it does help save lives by determining people for committing the crimes. It allows for people who are convicted and sentenced to death to be eased knowing that 12 people made a choice together. Doctors can make the final movements of a criminal's life at ease.